everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily and this is the Astral Library. And it's been a hot minute since we've done one of these, but it is my monthly wrap up. And because I didn't do one in January, because I don't know if I was busy or I was sick. I know I was sick in February, but regardless, I'm gonna wrap up both January and February. So it's just like, what have I been reading these past couple months? The answer is a lot and a varied amount. I actually have a mix of books that I've gotten from the library and books I've owned and some that I've listened via audiobook. So we're just gonna kind of roll with it and just go through all the ones I own because I only have a chunk of them here. So we're just gonna go ahead and get into this. So grab a snack and let's begin. So the very first book we're gonna talk about is The Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. Well, this was actually a gift I got in a book exchange, and I did talk about this in a vlog, but I just kind of wanted to share my general thoughts. But if you don't know, The Good Girl's Guide to Murder is a YA mystery series that follows our main character, Pip, who is obsessed with a crime that happened in her town a few years ago. In this story, Pip is a high school senior doing her senior project. She has decided that she wants to focus on a murder that happened in town where the popular girl Andy was supposedly killed by her boyfriend Sal. However, Pip does not believe Sal actually committed the crime, and so she has decided to dedicate her senior project to figure out what truly happened. And the closer she gets to discovering the truth, the more someone tries to stop her. This was a really fun time. I'm not gonna lie and say this is the best thing ever and it was like the most amazing mystery novel. It wasn't. It's kind of predictable, but it's fun. And honestly, that's all I want from a book like this. I don't need it to be hard-hitting and rule-breaking. I just need it to be fun, and even if I do guess what is happening, I still want to enjoy the ride for the ending, and that's exactly what this was. I can see why so many people were obsessed with this series when it first came out, because I'm obsessed. I want to know more. I fell in love with Pip. I thought she was funny. I thought the plot was just paced well enough that it kept me interested, but it also didn't feel like I was being blindsided by anything. It was a great time. I have bought the rest of the series because I do plan to read the remaining 2 books in this series because it was just so good. I ended up giving this a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and you know what? Even though that seems low, I just really enjoyed it for what it was. My biggest gripe with it is that at times it felt like the character was making dumb decisions for the sake of just like making dumb decisions and not being as smart as she presented herself to be. But other than that, I still had a great time with this. Again, I will be continuing with the series because I must know how everything else turns out, especially after the implications of this first text. And the summary of the next book sounds really good, so you might see that one pop up soon in a vlog. The next things that I've read that I actually physically own, I'm gonna talk about them together, are Kingdom of Copper and Empire of Gold by Shannon Chakraborty. These are the second and third book of the Davenport trilogy. So I finished out this series. I believe I read the first book back in December, and no, it was even further than that, but I finally got around to finishing these. I did this one in a combination of audiobook and physically reading it, and I believe I only physically read Empire of Gold. Both were phenomenal. I'm talking every book in this series just got better, which is not something that happens very often. In fact, it's very rare that I not only love the second book, but I love the third book, and I can't see either existing in this entire series. We need both. And normally you can ditch the second book. You cannot ditch the second book. This is so much setup and so much like great character development that continues from the first book and leads into the third book. It's so good. Every book got better and bigger, which was amazing. Since these are sequels, I can't tell you exactly what is going on in these two, but the overall series, and the first book being City of Brass, follows our main character Nadi, who is a con artist. And not only that, she's a con artist who has special abilities. She can heal really quickly, and she has a gift for languages. Well, one day she is doing a con and does this ritual in a language that just seems like gibberish. It's old, she doesn't really know what it is, but in actuality, the ritual she did is one that summons a djinn. She suddenly finds herself not only being hunted by this djinn, but also finding out that she may not be as human as she originally thought. And she suddenly finds herself lost in the world of djinn and the political intrigue that is going on in the city of Davenport. This was a phenomenal series start to finish. If you want a strong female character, if you want political intrigue, if you want really interesting character relationships and dynamics between characters, if you want a flawed main character and a flawed love interest, these books just do it. And this was Shannon Chakraborty's debut. That woman is mad. If you haven't read it, you need to give it a try. Like I said, every book just gets better in the series. There is no bad book in those series. There's no lull in the series. Every character is amazing. I've cried, I've laughed, I've raged over these. Honestly, I wish I could reread them over again for the first time because it was just that good. Whether you're doing physically or audiobook, both of them are amazing. Definitely give these a try. And of course, saying that, both of these books were 5 stars and they earned every one of those stars. Like I said, I'm so sad to see this series go because I just had such a great time reading it, and I will be on the hunt to try to get these in hardback because I need them. Like the paperbacks are great and everything, but the hardbacks, I need them. And maybe I'll try my hand to get to the Fairy Loot or Illumicrate editions because those are gorgeous, but I know those are gonna be big money. All right, and the very last book that I read and owned is Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. This is a contemporary thriller, I want to say. We are following 2 dads whose sons were brutally murdered and they decided that they are going to get revenge themselves. Now, this is a book that I've had on my TBR for a long while, and it wasn't until I was just hunting for an audiobook to listen to break up my commute to school that I decided to go ahead and try this one because the audiobook was okay, and thrillers are just like where it's at for audiobooks for me. Like, I feel like they're just fast enough that they're interesting and nothing can go wrong, right? And I didn't have high expectations for this book. I didn't know really what to expect. And when I tell you that I actually really fell in love with these characters and with this story, because we are following characters who are very much complicated and not perfect. We're following these fathers as they kind of reckon with the fact that, yes, not only have their sons been murdered, but they also have to deal with the fact that they were homophobic. That is characterized a relationship, and they never really got to actually dealt with that and never were able to mend the relationship with their sons because of their internal homophobia. And it is now too late for them to do anything about it. So not only do they have to figure out who murdered their sons brutally, but also deal with the fact that they will never be able to apologize for how they treated their sons while they were still alive. And not only that, but we're also following internal race issues as these fathers are both Black and white, have to overcome their own differences with that. I actually really fell in love with Buddy, who is the quote-unquote like white trash protagonist, and I like everything would tell me that I would hate this character, but I actually really loved him. He was funny. It was heartfelt to see his journey and kind of where he ended up. I also really like Ike. I think he is such a fascinating character that I would love to see in a prequel of this, to like get Ike's story, particularly as his whole riot persona. That's amazing. It was a great read. For as short as a book this is, this really hits on a lot of like powerful themes, and I feel like it gives enough time for each of those developments. It didn't feel rushed. Like, we didn't suddenly see Ike and Buddy become better people. They make mistakes as the book continues on, but we also see them trying and learning and accepting the fact that they will never be able to make up for what they did and how they treated their sons, especially now that they are no longer here. But it was satisfying. The revenge arc, great. Gotta love a good revenge story, and this one just does it right. I end up giving this 4 stars. All right, here comes the list of books I don't own that I either read via audiobook or read from my library. So we're gonna pull out the phone here. So the very first one on this list is Yellow Face by R.F. Kuang. This is an audiobook I did listen to, and it's actually my first R.F. Kuang book. And my God, what a time, because that book was a fucking trip. In this book, we are following our main character, June, who is an author that is kind of feeling stagnant in her career. Her debut novel flopped, and she just feels overall stuck in where to go. And she almost doubts whether or not she's going to be able to continue this career that she's wanted her whole life. On the opposite end, we have her friend Athena, who debuted around the same time, but her career has skyrocketed since. She is getting movie deals, her novels are flying off the shelves, and she has just reached a level of acclaim that has made June very deeply jealous. One day while June and Athena are hanging out, June finds Athena's latest manuscript that no one else has seen or knows about. However, that very same hangout actually ends in Athena's death, and June is left with Athena's unfinished manuscript, and she's left with the decision of whether or not she should tell anyone. June decides that she's actually going to pass the manuscript off as her own. So this novel follows June as she not only tries to keep this hidden, but how she is suddenly skyrocketed into fame after publishing this manuscript. What do I say about this book? Because it's kind of insane. June is the most unlikable narrator that I have ever experienced as just the character, but that's the entire point. This is a commentary on the publishing industry. It is a commentary on white authors that do shit like this because it's happened and just really get pushed above BIPOC authors. And R.F. Kuang, my god. This is a book that I could see why it polarized a lot of people, because it is not a book you're meant to necessarily enjoy because you are totally in June's head the entire time. And like I said, she's the most unlikable person ever. Like, oh my god, I wanted to shake this woman. I wanted to scream. She is literally the worst. But at the same time, it was so fascinating to read a story through that perspective and through someone you hate are doing like bad things. It just made it very, very interesting. It was kind of fun in a way to see how like much she bends herself backwards to twist logic. It was great. I also wished that if June was gonna go as far as she did, she just should have full sent it. Like, be the evil person that you are, rather than like being like this little bit of wishy-washy towards the end. That's my only critique I have for it. But overall, I had a fun time. I ended up rating this 4 stars. It was a great time, sort of. As much as like reading about someone you hate can be a good time, you know? But I definitely highly recommend it, especially if you're like interested in R.F. Kuang's writing. I think this is a great quick text to get through because of how short it is. It's only about 300 or so pages, and just how it's a more contemporary rather than her Poppy War, which is a trilogy, and Babel, which is a little bit more thick and dense. Definitely highly recommend. This is my first R.F. Kuang book, and I definitely will be reading more of her work. I do have Poppy War and I have Babel, and now I'm interested in both. All right, the next book I have is another thriller that I listened to as an audiobook, and it is The Butcher and the Wren by Elena, I'm gonna mess up this last name, I'm so sorry, Urquhart. What? This is a debut novel, and I just kind of like listened to it on a whim. It like popped up on my Spotify. I love the premise because in this book we're following a forensic pathologist, Dr. Ren Mueller, who has been getting all these bodies from this serial killer going on in Louisiana. This is a dual perspective story, so we get not only Ren's perspective, but we also get the killer's perspective, and we're looking at how these two are kind of in a cat and mouse game. That's all I can really tell you because that's all really that happened in this book. It is very much a setup for the rest of the series. It is not very long. It's novella length. It is under 250 pages. It's not long at all. I did not have a great time reading this. I ended up giving it a 2.5 star rating, and that is because this book teases you just enough with like an interesting premise and like an interesting twist, but there's nothing that really fucking happens at all. I get that book ones are supposed to set up the rest of the series, and that's totally doable and understandable, but I got nothing from this text, really. You get the one little twist, but then nothing happens. Like, we're building up towards a confrontation between and the killer, and then we sort of get one, and it's everything just fell flat. And then they have the audacity to do like a major cliffhanger with like zero resolution for anything else that happened, and I was just mad the entire time. It is definitely very cookie cutter in my opinion. It feels like a discounted Hannibal Lecter and Clarice Starling. It just, everything I wanted from it, it just wasn't giving, even though the idea of it is really, really cool. And like I said, that twist was very interesting, and I would have liked to have seen it built up more, first off, for it to actually have a larger implication than it ended up having in the book. All right, after that kind of shit show, I pivoted to fantasy again, and I actually read The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wong. This is a standalone epic fantasy that follows, a family that has for generations stood as the kind of protectors to this empire. And we are following several perspectives, but the main two perspectives we are following is the son of this family named Mamoru and his mother Misaki. What is interesting about this family, it is a family of warriors, and they like have passed down these powers for generations to generations. It is also a very patriarchal society in which women are seen as homemakers and taking care of children and producing the next generation of warriors. And Mamoru is the oldest son in this family and is expected to not only master the family martial arts and sword techniques, but also to grow up to be this paragon leader. At the same time, Misaki is also a woman who has power and strength and is a warrior in and of her own right, and yet she has had to suppress that to be the wife and mother for this family. There's not a lot I can say about this text because I think it really, really benefits going in not knowing too much about the world and the plot, because I feel like it just unfolds itself really well. This This book is so beautifully written and just so captivating in ways that I didn't think I was actually really gonna enjoy, because I'll be honest, Sword of Kaigen is like that one of those texts that's just very much like reads as boy fantasy, which if you know what I mean by that. But I was actually really thoroughly surprised by this text. I think it was well written. I think the characters are super interesting. I like the larger implications of the world and the complexity of the characters themselves. I did end up only rating this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And the reason for that is the pacing of this book is super fucking odd. We get the climax in the middle of the text, and then the literally other 40% of the book is an extended epilogue that I feel like doesn't do justice for some of our characters. And in fact, I really hate how Misaki's story ends. It's not what I wanted, and I understand how it came to be. It's fitting for the character in a way, but I also think it's a disservice to what the character could have been and the journey that we've been following her through the majority of the text. That's all I have to say. Again, it's a text that I think it's a book that you have to go in not knowing a lot about and just kind of experiencing for yourself. But I will definitely say that the pacing of it is very odd. So take that for what you will. Okay, a couple more left. The next thing I read is Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose. This is another one of my thriller audiobooks that I was listening to, and I actually started this one in January, ran out of like listening hours, and finished in February. When I like had that break in between, I was actually unsure whether or not I was going to like it, but it actually ended up turning really good. So Home is Where the Bodies Are follows these 3 siblings who are reunited after their mother's death, and they have led very different lives, and they've actually become estranged over the years because the oldest sister remained with the mother and just took care of her until her death. The youngest brother moved far away to California and made a whole bunch of money and just didn't talk to anyone. Middle sister fell into drugs and had an addiction problem. And so after their mother's death, they're kind of brought together and forced to face their kind of estrangedness and forced to confront the issues between themselves, because their family was really happy until one day their father suddenly abandoned them and everything seemed to fall apart. And as they're kind of trying to figure out what to do with the stuff in the house and generally just trying to settle the affairs of their mother and the estate, they come across old VHS tapes that their mother used to constantly film them and record their family history, and they decide that they're just gonna go ahead and watch a few for posterity's sake. However, when they pop in one of these tapes, they're actually confronted with the fact that their parents had a deep dark secret. This is, like I said, this was definitely a book that was kind of slow in the beginning, but once it picked up. It was so interesting and engaging, and it's one of those thrillers that, again, there's the crumbs there for you to follow and guess what is happening, but that doesn't detract from the enjoyment of it overall. In fact, I think it's really well done. I think that's what thrillers should aim for you to do. Yes, let me guess what is happening, but also let me still have fun, even though I've managed to guess who is the killer and what is actually going on. I love that shit so much because I'm a good guesser. I'm a smart lady, right? You're not always gonna fool me. But I still had a lot of fun even though I knew what was gonna happen. This author did a really good job painting the tension between the siblings, and because we got to look at all the different perspectives from each 3 siblings and got to hear from the mother herself as she narrated sections of the text that happened in the past, it was really interesting to see the story unfold. Highly recommend. I believe it's a recently published book that actually came out last year, and like I said, great one. I will definitely be reading more from this author because I want to see what other thrillers they've come up with, because if they're just as good as that one, I definitely want to know more. All right, and the very last book that I read for these past couple months was Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. This is the first book in a sci-fi trilogy called The Themis Files, and it follows a series of characters that are interacting with what they think is alien technology. We open up the book with Dr. Rose, who recounts as a child how she fell into a hole one day and she discovered a giant robotic hand made of material that no one could identify but was stronger than anything they have ever seen in our current technology. And so the book is told through a series of interviews, of journal entries, interrogation videos, and all sorts of things as this unknown interviewer and narrator goes through and interacts with the people as they try to discover what this hand is a part of. This was a really interesting text because it is very much sci-fi, and I would actually liken it to like an adult version of the Illuminae files, both in how it's constructed, also in terms of like its theme. Like there's a larger plot going on that we see kind of develop through our different perspectives. That was really fun and that was really interesting. It is kind of slow for this first book for what it is. It's not a long book. It's 300 pages and it took me eons to read, partly because like I just had to have the time, but also the pacing of the story is very slow moving. It does pick up as the novel progresses, but I would say that 60 to 70% of this book is slow. That being said, it's not a very complex sci-fi. Like I definitely would recommend this if someone's trying to get more into adult sci-fi. In terms of progression, like Illuminae is a very beginner friendly sci-fi. I think Sleeping Giants would be a nice intermediate because it has more of that serious sci-fi tone that you'd find in like hardcore sci-fi, but it's also still very approachable and understandable like Illuminae files. Again, really enjoyed it. It actually also gave me an absolutely remarkable thing kind of vibes, just in terms of like the interaction with the extraterrestrial. Very, very cool, very interesting. I originally said I wasn't going to continue on with this series just because I felt like the first book was so slow, and I think that was largely in part due to the author's writing. But I've since changed my mind and I've actually gotten a bit further into the second book, and the pacing definitely picks up after the events of the first book. I believe that the first book is entirely set up for what's going to happen in books 2 and 3, so that's something to keep in mind. You might want to hold off judgment until you've read at least the second book. I know I'm going to fully. I ended up giving this a 3-star originally, and I do think that holds. This first book is very slow, but the premise of it is really engaging and fun, and I could see a lot of people enjoying it. All right, but that is all the books I've read in both January and February. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed hearing me ramble about the things I've read. I have to say, despite me being as busy as I've been in the past couple of months, and just like the weird spread of like what I am reading, I think I did pretty well. There was only a few books that I was just like wasn't here for, did not enjoy, but overall I was reading books I was really, really interested in, and I've hit my sci-fi like era because I've read a lot of sci-fi lately, and I'm spoiled. I'm in the middle of 2 more sci-fi books right now, and like I'm here for it. Like I'm a fantasy girly through and through, but sci-fi is like a nice palate cleanser, and I think I need it before I dive into some more fantasy. But that's for future videos. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you liked it, please consider leaving a thumbs up and a comment down below. Let me know if you've read any of these books, or what was your favorite book that you read in the past couple of months. I am always curious to know. Or if you want to show your love and that you were here to the end of the video, go ahead and leave me a hand emoji for Sleeping Giant and the big hand that started it all. But that's gonna go ahead and be it for me. I hope to see you guys in the next video. Bye!